Whether a property business should be registered for VAT in the UK depends on several factors, including the nature of the taxpayer's business activities, its turnover, whether the taxpayer wants to voluntarily register for VAT if the taxpayer's turnover is below 90,000. So typically a property business could be anything from making residential property rentals, residential property sales, commercial property rentals, sales, and what I will try to do is pick each one of these separate, look at each one of these separately. Sales of existing residential properties is usually VAT exempt, which obviously means you're making exempt supplies. You don't have to register for VAT. You can't register for VAT because your supplies are exempt residential property. Sale of new residential properties is zero rated and taxable. You can register for VAT. Should you register for VAT? Most definitely, because you would have incurred some costs on which you would have incurred VAT. I would expect that you would want to recover that VAT, so you would register for VAT to recover it, knowing that when you make your sales would all be zero rated. You're not charging anyone VAT, but you're recovering VAT. So in that example, I would expect the taxpayer to register for that. If a taxpayer supplies residential rentals, by default that's VAT exempt. That sort of a taxpayer would incur VAT that they can't recover, and unfortunately, because they're making exempt supplies, they're unable to recover the VAT on their costs. So yeah, I wouldn't expect that taxpayer to be able to register or to register for VAT. I mentioned also that some taxpayers could have commercial property activities. So typically, if you had a taxpayer with commercial property rentals, in other words, renting out office space, factory space, things like that, by default it's VAT exempt. But VAT law allows that sort of a taxpayer to opt to tax their interest in that property, and once you opt to tax your interest in that property, you can charge VAT on it. If you've never made exempt supplies of commercial property, of that particular commercial property, then you can automatically simply just opt to tax, notify HMRC of your option, and start charging VAT on it. So I would expect that sort of a taxpayer to register for VAT, opt to tax when they're registering for VAT, notifying HMRC at that time, and recover the VAT on their costs. If a taxpayer is selling commercial property, and the commercial property they're selling is existing commercial property, it's by default exempt. So you've probably picked out the trend here. Supplies of land and property is exempt in most cases. In some cases it's taxable. In some cases it's taxable at the zero rate as well. In some cases at the standard rate. Sales of commercial property by default is VAT exempt, but if it's a new building, in other words less than 3 years old, it is taxable at a standard rate by default. So that taxpayer would have to register for VAT in order to recover the VAT on the cost of constructing the commercial building. If it's an old commercial building, you buy this building, the person selling it to you hasn't opted to tax on it, they sell it to you, they will sell it to you VAT exempt. You buy the building and you're planning to carry out some refurbishment works on this particular building, I would ordinarily advise you to register for VAT, opt to tax your interest on the building in order to recover the VAT on your cost of refurbishing the building, bearing in mind that you will then start to charge whoever you let the building to or whoever you sell the building to, you'll have to charge them VAT. Property is, in the world of VAT, is extremely complicated. I would always advise that you contact a VAT advisor if you're doing anything to do with property, whether it's new, old, or indeed there's no property on the land at all.